Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard.
Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on this podcast. He's an individual who has been working to change the system and to advance alternative parties. He's running for office. His name is Wacey Alpha Cody. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Wacey, if you could get started by first kindly telling us what office you're running for and what party you're running with.
Okay, so I'm running for United States Congress here in Texas, Congressional District 11, and
Okay.
I am affiliated with the Libertarian Party.
Okay, excellent. I would like to talk more about your district and other things like that. If we could also talk about your background, so if you could please give us a brief biographical sketch of your life, that would be awesome.
Oh, okay. So brief might be difficult, but so I was born in Northeast Texas, northeast of Dallas. We moved to West Central Texas, or in Brady, a small town about an hour from San Angelo. When I was going into the second grade, then we moved to San Angelo 3 years later. And
Okay.
San Angelo has been my permanent residence ever since then. I graduated from a little school just north of San Angelo called Great Creek. And while going to high school, I started riding bucking horses. My dad rodeoed, my older brother rodeoed, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go off to various colleges on rodeo scholarships, so that helped me afford to go to college.
Interesting. I didn't realize there was such a thing as rodeo scholarships.
Yeah, it's kind of wild that a lot of the people that do go to college and rodeo are generally on some form of assistance, whether that's books or room and board or a full ride so it's very, very similar to baseball or football that you're able to help the cost of attending college with your athletic performance.
Okay.
So I went to school, and as I always say, I took the long and winding path to my undergrad. My 4-year degree took 9 years. But then I went on and got a master's degree in counseling psychology here in San Angelo at Angelo State. And I was doing that, and I realized I really liked the academia and the research more than the clinical setting. And kind of oddly enough, I slowly found different jobs, and I cycled back to what I wanted to be when I was a little kid, which is a rancher.
Oh.
So
interesting.
I've seen a lot of sites and done a lot of jobs, but I guess it's one time I heard that when you're a little kid and you have a dream job, often that seems to be where your passion lies, or something, is how it was phrased, and
sure.
It was true for me anyway.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you're finding that career fulfillment. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes.
So what did you learn from doing rodeo that you can apply in politics?
Well, it wasn't so much there's some stuff I learned through rodeo, and I guess that'd be the individualism, kind of, that you as a person are better at managing your money, choosing your profession, everything about you that you control, you are better at it than anyone else ever will be, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But
sure.
The thing that rodeoing allowed me to do was travel our nation, and that's the main thing from those travels, is that East Coast, West Coast, North, South, we are more alike than we will ever be different. I don't care what your political beliefs are, we have more in common than we do have different. And I think that's a thing that is lost on in a lot of the political sense. They want to have big fights about small differences. Where to me, if we were at a place where we had less government, we had less influence on that individualism I was just mentioning about, we have no political difference because the government is not involved in that difference.
Oh.
And I think that's pretty much the key thing I learned, like life has taught me, including rodeo, about, I guess, where some of my political beliefs come from.
Okay. So earlier you mentioned that you're running for the 11th district. Can you please tell us the demographics of that district?
Well, on the western portion of it contains Midland, Odessa, and Midland, Odessa for as long as oil has been in Texas has always been a big oil boom and bust center.
Okay.
Then you start heading east and south. It's kind of a weird triangle-shaped district, but as you head east and west, you start getting, east and south, you start getting more precipitation. You go from a much more oil field focused industry to much more agrarian, both farming and ranching. The main cash crop, I would say, is cotton. And then this area used to be, I'm pretty sure, the largest sheep and goat, like, per capita of the world, much less the United States. It was, in years gone by, it was really, really big in wooled sheep and I think mohair goats.
Oh, okay.
And it has since been replaced with a lot of haired sheep, which are like dorpers. I don't know if your listeners are, are understanding what I'm talking about, but these sheep are more meat sheep rather than wool producing sheep.
Okay.
And there's still a huge sheep influence and goat influence, and then also cattle, depending on what part you're at.
Oh, sure.
And the major population centers would be both San Angelo and Midland, Odessa. And then on the far eastern south part, we start to get into the hill country, but none of the main population centers of the hill country, like Austin or San Antonio or any of that, are part of this district.
Okay. So I think I'm sorry I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, well, and then I'd say, I mean, I don't have any statistics, but I'd say the heritage would be white, Caucasian, Hispanic, and then African American would probably be the next classification.
Okay. So it's fairly diverse?
Yeah. Is that kind of the information you were looking for? Yes,
that's great. That's good stuff. Also, would you say it's red, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely Republican leaning, but I assume some of your questions are going to get to this, but I once thought I was a Republican until I learned more about the Republican Party. But, yeah, it definitely goes red when it has two options.
Okay. So mentioning that, when you thought you were a Republican, what did you find out about the Republican Party that you didn't like?
So when in our long-standing, what do you call him? Congressman, I think Mike Conaway, I think was Mike, but Congressman Conaway, he retired in 2020, I believe.
Okay.
So you have this long-standing Republican candidate in a mainly rural agrarian oil-field district. The field was probably at one point 10 to 15 people of various backgrounds running for his position. in the Republican Party. And early on, I was one of them. And and this was early enough, it was like before all the formal deadlines when you had to be affiliated with parties and all of these different things. And various candidates were meeting at places and I was getting invitations. And the more I read the Republican state platform and the Republican, like the whole Republican platform of the nation, the more I talked with people, I would almost get pushback when I'd say, I don't believe the government should be spending money on stuff. I want a government that would stop spending my tax dollar. I am better at running my affairs than somebody in Washington, D.C. or Austin or even at the local level at City Hall will ever be. And just like you are better at running your affairs than I would ever be at running them. If a person has kids, the parents are better at raising their kids than I will be. And there would be pushback where it was, yes, but we believe in this. Okay, but don't we also believe in a limited government? And the more I talked with people, the more I realized one of two things were going to happen, or I guess one of three things. One, everybody that I spoke to would have to change their opinion to be like me. Two, my opinions would have to change to be like theirs. Or three, and I think this is by far the most often case that happens with political figures, is I represent myself in a disingenuous way. I just walk around the room and I say, oh yeah, I agree. And everybody leaves that room thinking I agreed with them, and I just have turned myself into a yes man. And the more I thought about it, I was like, I'm doing this because I believe that government on all levels, especially the federal level, has become too over-encompassing on our day-to-day life. So I'm not going to choose to be disingenuous, and that's where I started finding that I had more in common with the Libertarian Party. You know, the root word of libertarian is liberty, and that's where the name comes from. That as a whole, the party believes you have the right to rule yourself more than an overarching centralized government. And I realized that, like, halfway through this process, I was saying I would get invited to forums and I would say, listen, I'm running as a libertarian candidate. I am a conservative person, but you realize that you're inviting me and I would still get invitations because the people that made up these parties, I agreed with what I was saying, even though they may not end up voting for me. So that's how I transitioned from what I thought was republicanism or Republican ideals into a party that fit my ideals in I didn't have to cherry pick, if that makes sense.
Sure. So for this race, what are the major issues that are in your platform?
I think it goes back to a lot of what I just said. The thing I disagree with from a fundamental level is Congress members want to write laws. They want to spend tax dollars, and so seldom is there somebody saying, no, quit spending people's money. That's not your dollar. Don't look for a reason to spend tax dollars. Look for freedoms that the government has taken control of and return that back to the people and allow them to dictate how they want to spend their money. Because I go back to like 501c charities.
Okay.
The IRS, an actual arm of the federal government, recognizes that a private charity is more efficient than any government program and bureaucracy can ever be. That's why you can write off that donations. So if I think something is better at like feeding homeless children in San Angelo, if I give it directly to that charity in San Angelo, it goes from my pocket to that charity to those people. Where if it's a government sanctioned program, it goes from my pocket to an office to a different office all the way to DC, and then it starts filtering back. In any program, the more layers of bureaucracy, the more inefficient it is from a financial standpoint, and the less it represents the individual that gave that dollar. So I just, from a investment standpoint, I believe Wacey is a better steward of his finances than the federal government is. If I want to blow all my money from 24 to 64, and when I'm done working, I'm penniless, that's my choice. You as an individual have the choice to succeed, but you also have the freedom to fail. And that's where, to me, I think so many entrepreneurial ideas come from, because it's the sky's the limit. And as the old saying goes, invention is something is the mother of necessity. Do you know the saying I'm talking about, where it's like,
yes, yeah, I've heard that before.
And I guess it's invention's the mother of necessity, or something, that when there is a need and there's somebody that identifies that need and then they can capitalize on that need, there's no overarching structure that's holding those ideas back.
Okay, sounds good. So in this podcast, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh no, I was going to say, and when I say that, I'm not trying to say we need total anarchy of no child labor laws, and you know, I'm not meaning just total annihilation of what we know. It's just, I believe there needs to be a voice in government saying government is wrong, government restricts freedom, and you dang well need to prove we need to restrict this freedom or tax this person before we just do it.
Sure, sounds good. So in order to make the system better, what reform or reforms do you think would help?
Specifically, I don't know. And it's kind of, I don't want to sound ignorant, but I don't think it's a fix that one person can magically snap their fingers and do. I think, as I said, when I call myself a conservative, I define that as an individual that believes two things. One, they can run their life better than anybody else. And two, they do not want a centralized government dictating life to them.
Okay.
And as a conservative, I think the best practice is always to try to return the power and liberty of how you want to be in life back to the individual person. So if we could create a budget, just me and you, just a fictional number, and instead of me taxing you to fulfill that budget, I'm able to lessen that budget and return that dollar to you. Do you think you could do more good in your life and the people around you with that dollar or dollars than I ever could controlling the budget?
Sure.
So that is it's not a singular act or a singular reform. It's the ideal that people need to be in control of their, their just entirety of existence.
Okay. Okay, that's your basic philosophy.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, good. Good. So how are you reaching the voters in this race? Are you going door to door? Are you holding events, or what are you doing?
Well, I've not been able to do much. I have changed a lot since I ran in 2020. I was contacted by the Libertarian Party to run again this go round, and like I told them, I'm really busy from a time constraint and from a financial constraint when it comes to being able to just go to go to events, trying to have any debates with the Republican candidate. But one of the best things, I think, and it kind of ties to your podcast, is if nothing else, there is an option.
Yes.
There is a name beside. There's an additional option other than just the Republican candidate, and I think I do believe that's one of the. I don't want to say baddest. I think the more appropriate word is saddest. In states of our across the nation, election is, they're like gimmies. We know that a Democrat's going to get elected in California. We know that a Republican's going to get elected in Kansas. We know this. We know this. It's so much so that in a population, so San Angelo has roughly 100,000 people. I think Midland has, between the Midland and Odessa, I don't think it may be pushing 500,000, but it's dang sure 250,000. Okay. So there's 350 to 600,000 people in the two major population centers. I don't think the Republican had an opponent. So we are just going to anoint this person to run as our congressman over and over without ever making them earn it. No wonder Washington, D.C. ends up with corrupt people. They don't have to remain true to the people. We have one of the most amazing and fascinating, it undeniably has flaws, yes, but one of the most amazing and fascinating systems in the history of human civilization, and that is you get to choose your elected officials. You have an input on the laws that are created in this nation, and by and large, give or take 300 years after that system was created, we're very laissez-faire. We're very standoffish. We don't care. And I'll throw the first stone at me. I was like that. I didn't even understand the party that I thought I was part of 4 years ago. And I mean, from a local all the way to the federal level, people that are no more brilliant than you and I, and I'm not trying to throw stones at them, just everyday people are creating laws that dictate how you could raise your kids. They dictate what medicines. I mean, I read an article once where children, like parents of children who had terminal cancers, were like arguing just as angry as they could with congressmen and women about not being allowed to have their children have experimental drugs that could potentially save their life. And it's like, oh no, we know what we're doing. We're doing it for your safety. Listen, bub, my kid is dying and you're telling me I can't give my child, I can't sign. I know the risk. It's my son or daughter. And I guess that's what I'm saying is we are so ingrained that there's two options, and we are so just carefree about the fact that these people dictate life to us, even unintentionally. Because as soon as they create a law, that's a law. You can't really argue with a law. And I think that's a shame that a thing that our founders fought tooth and nail to create, we have kind of just expect that it will always be here.
So we can't take it for granted.
No, I don't. We can. I did. I mean, I know when I turned 18, I didn't immediately run down, sign up to vote, and vote in the first midterm election.
Oh.
You know what I mean? And I think that's part of it, is that we as a society don't educate our children. And I don't mean like, oh, you need to vote Republican, you need to vote Democrat. No, educate our children on how precious a gift this is compared to all of human history.
Well put.
Because there are some nations in 2024, you and I could not be having this phone call. You and I could not be having this discussion with, to your point, the freedom of speech, because somebody is either monitoring the phones, or there's somebody over our shoulder that's whispering to the the man, or whatever the term would be, that will lock you up for speaking your mind. And that's kind of the best. That's the starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something to think about.
And I realize that didn't exactly answer your question, but I'm sure you've heard this from multiple of your alternative candidates. It's really difficult to fight the system.
Yes. So given that's true, how do you keep your spirits up?
One, I don't watch much news. I don't, ironically, as a person running for political office, I don't talk about politics a lot. We are sadly at a point where you could get in a fist fight at Thanksgiving talking politics. Or one could, I don't want to say you would do that. One could, I mean, that harkens back to a time when one of the main things was brother fought against brother. Do you know what that describes? The United States Civil War.
Yeah. And
I think it's to a degree lighthearted to compare our time and place now to the pre-Civil War, but it's also kind of serious to talk about how there are true parallels. There are very, very divisive people getting elected, and one of the key components that led to that was divisive people making stipulations that changed people's lives. And I'm not saying I'm a proponent for slavery. I don't know that anyone could ever say that. What I'm saying is everyday people were scared these elected officials were going to change their life. And rightfully so. Slavery is heinous. It was heinous. But that fear of them changing everyday life led to them taking up arms against the government. Correct?
Sure.
And there are people that are truly scared that there are going to be laws enacted that change their everyday lives. And I'm not meaning a radical person. I'm in ag. I go to feed stores all the time. I go to sale barns. You have a conversation with 5 to 10 minutes with just anybody. They are worried that government entities are going to make it where they cannot perform their livelihood anymore. And these are not radical people. Like, these are not zealots. These are just everyday people trying to do what they have a passion for and what their life experience has taught them they are good at. And I know during the middle of COVID, I was working at a vet clinic and I was starting my own little ranching operation. And for years, I carried around the letter that the vet had to have written that said I was what were those called? Like nurses and the people that were allowed to be out and doing business.
Essential workers.
Yes. That I was an essential worker. Okay. In the United States of America, I had to carry a letter that said I was okay to be on the streets. When framed like that, isn't that kind of a crazy statement?
Yeah, in that sense.
So you start going down that rabbit hole. I was worried that, like, with all of the food shortages, I'm in the beef industry, and I've raised, like, I started with calves that I bottle raised. They were, and I still have the cows. They were no less of a pet than my dog running around in the backyard right now.
Wow.
And my wheels started spinning that with all of this beef shortage, all of my cows are close to town. Some government agency's just going to come up and be like, "We need your cow." I'm like, no, I didn't, sir, Mr. Cody, I didn't ask. We're confiscating these cows for beef production. San Angelo is short of beef. Is that far-fetched? Yes. But at the same time, I was carrying a letter in my wallet that said I was allowed to be out of the house. I was an essential personnel, an essential worker. And that's it. When I talk to people in everyday life about the pandemic, about the restrictions, about the lockdowns, it's almost like, oh, they'll never fool us again. Yeah, but pretty much all of us, from politicians to peace officers to the military, I mean, all of these ideals that are supposed to protect us from an overreach of government, all just kind of said, sounds good. You can take people's employment away.
Yeah, I heard some people were saying that it felt very insulting to say that you weren't essential because everyone's essential.
Yeah, and your paycheck is dang sure essential to your your grocery bill.
Yep.
And life is hard, and I don't believe that there are. I'd like to think I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think there's people behind the scenes trying to steal power from us, the people, and create this like new world order, so to speak. I'm not trying to phrase it in any way that's like that, but it is no doubt that our governor here in Texas said, you're allowed to go to work and you aren't because person A is an essential and I as the governor get to dictate what is an essential personnel and what is not. And that how we were just talking about how it's an amazing freedom because in some places me and you couldn't have this conversation.
Yep.
What if a governor just up and says, you know what, here in Minnesota, you're not allowed to have that conversation anymore. Here in South Dakota, you're not allowed to work in that industry anymore. Here in Texas, if I deem you an industry as non-essential, I'll just stop it from being able to, work.
Mm.
Because they did it.
Sure. So, Wacey, how can our audience support you in your campaign?
I think first things first is share this podcast.
Okay.
Because, I mean, there's already, right there is a forum that's helping educate people that there are alternatives. 2, and this is a more individualistic choice, one thing that I think all third-party candidates face is a voter that's like, I don't want to waste my vote.
Yep.
So they just choose one of the main two parties, the better of two evils. And I think this is how they, not just specifically me, but all candidates. 1, hold your candidates accountable to the ideals they say. And 2, it is your vote. No matter if you pencil in Mickey Mouse, that's a wasted vote. But if you believe in a candidate on any level, from local to national, you voting for who you believe is never a waste.
Good put.
Well put. And on the flip side of that, if you are, like in my race, it's a Republican candidate and a Libertarian candidate. If you're fed up with the Republican Party or Republican candidates, vote for the alternative.
Exactly.
If you don't believe, one of the amazing things about our system is there are so many checks and balances. It is, sadly, despite all the human error that we are all prone to, we've done a pretty good job of not totally screwing it up. And that is one of the great things is if you've had for years and years and years, and let's just say, Republican and Democrat, years and years and years of this subpar Republican, but you feel that way, vote for the Democrat. It's not like they're going to screw up more than this person lying to you.
Good point.
And the same point is, the more we the people just pull the Republican lever. I've literally sat at a Republican county meeting one time and heard the county chairperson say, I don't care what a person believes as long as they're pulling the Republican lever. But what? The whole premise of we the people being in charge is you the elected are supposed to care what we feel.
Yeah.
And that I think is a great way to support me and all third party candidates and truly make lasting change is to get third party candidates more and more support, because one of two things is going to happen. A, the main two parties are going to start to really realize we need to think about what we're doing as a political system and listen to the people. Or 2, they're going to start losing elections. And that's just going to start making it easier for other people who aren't as motivated as your listeners to seek third-party alternatives to then say, you know what? I'm not wasting my vote. That guy won in that state. That lady won in that state. I'm going to vote for the third party. So I think, I mean, because I don't even have a campaign account because I'm not in 2020 when I ran before, I declared, so on the federal level, you don't have to have an account and declare with the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, until you hit a $5,000 spending threshold. So as long as I don't spend more than $5,000, it's like drops in a bucket. It's so little that that's where their mark is on where, like, you can start being corrupt with your funds and stuff. That listeners can't donate to me, but I don't want them to donate to me. I would rather them donate to a charity in their community than donate to a political candidate.
Wow.
Because that's going to help their community.
That's a good, interesting perspective.
And so on that, I get so when you file these formal things with the state of Texas, it's all public knowledge. Like you could pull the different forms, the different addresses. In 2020, I got a post office box. I did everything like which I'm still gung ho, but I did everything. I'd get off work, I'd drive to places trying to be at different talks and stuff. Well, it made sense that I was getting flyers like use so-and-so advertising agency, buy your yard signs through us. I declared with the Secretary of State. Probably the next day, the first postcard dang near was in my mailbox. These postcards aren't coming from local businesses. I get postcards from Iowa, Minnesota, Virginia. If I'm running for office in District 11, shouldn't my campaign funds be spent at advertising agencies in District 11? Why?
Good point.
Why should a candidate ever spend their money elsewhere?
Yes.
Be part of your community.
Yes.
But that's the thing that's awakened me. Like I said, 30-party candidates have so much of a uphill fight. There is so much money, unbelievable, astronomical amounts of money that are in the political system. And I'd like to think we the people our votes aren't bought and sold, but there's an exceptionally high correlation between which candidate raises the most money and which candidate gets elected.
Yes. That's true. Wacey, thank you for coming on the podcast today and talking about your life and your campaign.
Absolutely. I hope it's been a positive experience for your listeners. I hope you enjoyed me as a guest. I really enjoyed it, and I hope my answers were good.
Yes, we thank you. And we wish you all the best in your campaign, in your ranching career, and everything else you do in life.
Thank you, and I appreciate you. Like I said, I appreciate you having me as a guest, and I look forward to your podcast helping to educate voters and spread the message that there are options out there.
Perfect. We wish you all the best. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.